Chapter 8 Crisis. The stars are moving. He blinks a few times to be sure of it, and the stars just keep spinning, leaving behind faint trails of light etched into the velvety dark of the sky. Nothing will come into focus, and he can't manage to turn his head, but everywhere he looks is the same. Stars and shadows alike warp and twist away as though trying to escape from him. The motion makes him dizzy and turns his stomach sour, but he doesn't close his eyes. He doesn't dare to. It takes all his effort, all his strength to make sense of his surroundings. And so long as his mind is occupied with the twisting, lurching stars above him, he can feel nothing else. That's the way he wants it. In some distant, near inaccessible part of his mind, he's aware that something is wrong. He's aware that he's hurt. But if he keeps his eyes open, if he stares up at the sky until the stars turn bright enough to make his eyes water, then he doesn't have to feel any of it. He can know that he's been hurt without hurting. And if he keeps his eyes open, then maybe he can keep himself from slipping. Maybe if he holds on long enough, whatever is wrong with him will mend itself. Or maybe the fact that it seems possible means that he's already begun to fade away. A dark, blurry form looms overhead, and panic grips his insides. No. The shadow is blocking out the stars. He has to keep his eyes on them. They're the only things keeping him anchored. Can you hear me? He can, and he latches onto the voice. He can still hear. That has to be a good sign. He can see and he can hear. It takes much longer before his mind sorts out the words, and longer still before he realizes that he's meant to answer. The sound he produces is barely human, just a faint, crackling moan. Even that is too much. His lungs protest the effort, and the dam holding back the feeling breaks. Pain strikes him like a wall. Somehow, the world has turned from velvety black to brilliant, burning white agony. His eyes squeeze shut, and a horrid, rasping noise fills the air. The sound can only be coming from him, and yet he isn't aware of making it. He can hardly think. He can hardly breathe. He doesn't know how many more beats his heart can manage. Shh. It's the same voice as before, still soft, still gentle as it tries to quiet him, but he can't stop the noise escaping from him. The pain has taken control, and he feels his consciousness flickering, fading. Just breathe, slowly. A single point of coolness cuts through the burning pain. Hold on, okay? I've got you. The rasping quiets, then stops, and he can't tell whether it's because of the coolness or not. Everything still hurts. He still has to struggle to breathe. It still feels as though he's flickering out of existence. But the coolness spreads outward until he can feel hands wrapped around him, keeping all his broken pieces contained, holding them in place. At first, it's worse like this. Any contact is too much to bear, no matter how soft. All his shattered edges press against one another, grinding him to dust from the inside. But he can do nothing to escape it, and slowly the edges begin to wear away. The agony softens, but the hands remain. He doesn't know how long it's been when he manages to pry open his eyes. There is a glow now, soft and bluish-white, centered somewhere near his stomach. It's too bright for him to look that way, but his gaze fixes on something else hovering over him and illuminated by the unearthly glow. A face. A girl's face. Though the edges blur and details swim in and out of focus, he is certain of that much. A girl with dark curls hanging loose around her shoulders and vivid streaks of crimson all across her face. Vaguely, he wonders whether the streaks are blood or burns or something else. Whether she needs any help to tend her own injuries, or if she is somehow covered in his blood. Her eyes flick toward his, and something tries to awaken in the back of his mind. She's familiar. Something about her face, her voice. He reaches, grasping for more detail, but it slips through his fingers. He can scarcely remember his own name or bring his eyes into focus. How can he possibly recognize another person when there is nothing but blurry patches of color as far as he can see? For what feels like a long time, the girl stays still, bowed over him and staring at the glow around his middle. Even when the glow fades away and the coolness recedes, she doesn't look his way again. Not that it would make much difference. Exhaustion strikes him in a wave, and between the invisible weight keeping him immobile and the now blunted pain, he can barely keep his eyes open. He doesn't mind very much. The darkness is soft, and he is so tired that he can't bring himself to care about anything else. In the dark, he can rest. I have to move you. The girl's voice is quiet as ever, but her tone is formal now, almost stiff. It's going to hurt, but I have to get you somewhere safe. Safe. That sounds nice. Though his memory is foggy, he remembers danger. He remembers fear. He remembers chasing a dark, hulking shadow across a tangled, overgrown meadow because of something. Something important. He can't remember exactly what it was. Hold on. The warning comes too late, and before he can prepare himself, the pain awakens again as a pair of small, cool hands roll him onto his side. He scarcely manages to catch his breath before the hands roll him back over, and he is left lying on his back, dark spots dancing across his vision. He wonders if it's even possible for him to be safe, whether he'll survive being moved anywhere. It doesn't feel like it. Even after the pain begins to dull, he feels like he's falling apart. For a moment, the girl stands over him before she bends down, and he begins to move. It hurts. Less than he expects it to, and he thinks he can feel some kind of coarse cloth keeping him off the ground, but it hurts all the same. Fragments of questions float through his mind. Why isn't he safe here? Where is she taking him? What exactly has happened to him? Is he going to live? But he can't seem to hold on to any of them long enough to try forming the words. It's all he can do to keep his eyes open as he tries to focus on the sky. And when he briefly sees the girl silhouetted against the soft indigo overhead, he thinks he remembers her. From a village somewhere, he thinks. A village where people whispered about a spirit who brought them healing in the night. A spirit who could do impossible things and somehow believed that a tiny, half-forgotten village was worth her effort. It seems impossible. It is impossible, and yet the figure pulling him along the ground doesn't change. He remembers her. She is the spirit from the village. He must be hallucinating. There are no spirits with healing powers. None who would deign to help him, at least. Maybe he's dying. Maybe his mind invented the girl to help ease him into oblivion. Fresh waves of pain rip through his nerves, and everything stills. Stay with me. I know where we have to go. The world darkens a bit as she leans over him and arranges his arms so they no longer lie so uncomfortably at his sides. For now, this is the best I can do. The stars begin to move again. There's a cave around here somewhere. Katara keeps her eyes down, doing her best to keep her pace steady so as not to jostle her surprisingly heavy burden. He doesn't look that much bigger than she is. He's taller, of course, and undeniably bulkier in the chest and shoulders, but it seems almost absurdly difficult to drag him along. The cave is close. She keeps repeating that. Maybe not as close as she would like, but it's the nearest shelter she can think of. For now, that's all that matters. He's hurt, and he needs to be somewhere safe. Somewhere that's not the still smoldering clearing. Somewhere away from the scorched patches of earth and bits of debris left behind by the man who could have killed them both. This is the least she can do. Isn't it? She fights the urge to look back at him. She has seen his face enough times. She doesn't need any further confirmation. She doesn't want it. If she doesn't look back, then she won't have to think about who stepped in to save her. She can pretend that he's just a boy. It's simpler this way. Safer, too. One step at a time. She has to get him to the cave. Everything else can wait. The trouble is that she can only pull him a few inches at a time. The spare cloth from her painted lady robes is more than sturdy enough to drag him along, but he's heavy, and the ground is uneven, and the cave is much, much farther up the hill. For a while, she manages to keep moving, to keep her attention focused on the path ahead. He saved her life. She doesn't understand why he did it, but she can't leave him like this. She can't just let him die. But she is tired from the strain of healing him, and she can only make it so far before she has to pause to catch her breath. As hard as she tries, she can't keep herself from looking back. He's lost consciousness. Katara isn't sure whether she should be grateful for that or not. She certainly isn't surprised. He's so badly injured that it would be far more surprising to find him awake. And at least like this, he can't recognize her. It's probably less painful for him, too. She crouches down beside him and lets her hand hover just over his chest. Even without water, without touching him, she can feel the damage. Burnt and blistering skin, crushed and torn organs, shattered bones. And farther down, energy knots around his spine, so tight and tangled that she can't tell what is at the core of it. Broken bones, nerves ripped to shreds from the force of the blast and his landing. Anything seems possible. She just can't feel it through the haze of tangled energy, not without picking apart all the knots to find what's underneath. Her gaze finds its way to his face again. Why does it have to be him? Of all the people in the world, he shouldn't be here. He shouldn't have helped her. She lingers on the scarred side of his face longer than she likes. She remembers the way the smooth, hardened ridges in his skin felt beneath her fingertips back in Ba Sing Se, the soft warmth of his breath against her palm, and... With a gasp, she pushes herself back to her feet and grabs the cloth beneath his head again. The cave. She needs to get him to the cave before she tries to figure out anything else. This time, she keeps her eyes on the forest ahead even when she has to stop to rest. She can't afford to think about him. She's helping the boy who saved her. The boy who didn't hesitate to leap onto a man more than twice his size, to contain the attack meant for Katara. If he didn't stop to worry about who she was before stepping in to help, then she can try to separate the too familiar face from the boy who saved her. She manages it for a while, until she reaches the cave, until she has no choice but to turn around to pull him the last few steps. By then, the sky is fading to a faint lavender gray, and Katara can hardly feel her arms. Still, she does her best to avoid his face as she settles him in place and kneels by his side. He's still breathing. Not well, but he's breathing, and her efforts at repairing the damage to his organs seems to be holding up. That, she supposes, is the best she can expect. After a long, slow breath, she rolls him onto his side to work the cloth out from beneath him, then rolls him onto his back again. Then, at last, she has no choice but to look at his face again. Zuko. Zuko was the one who saved her. Zuko is the boy she healed and dragged away to shelter. And now Zuko's life is in her hands. The enormity strikes her all at once, and she sits with a thump, clenching her hands together to stop them shaking. Why is Zuko here? What would have happened if not for his intervention? Did he know what he was doing? Who he was saving? What would happen to him when he did? Did he know the man who attacked Katara? Or was it all an impulse? Did he just wander out into the night and happen across Katara and the man pursuing her by mistake? Did he leap into action because fighting is in his blood? She can almost believe that last possibility. She's seen Zuko fight plenty of times before. Picking fights most of the time. She can almost believe that he would see a huge, terrifying man lurking in the bushes and intervene just because he could. But in all the times she's seen him fight, Katara can't remember anything like this. She can't remember him ever defending anyone. Certainly not someone he didn't know. He'd never defend her. She pulls her knees up to her chest. Now that she's given in, she can't bring herself to look away from Zuko. His hair is longer. Aside from his injuries, that's the only real difference she can find in him. Aside from the burns trailing up and down both arms, aside from his scorched and blackened tunic, aside from the bruises blossoming through the tattered remains of his clothing, he looks just like he did in Ba Sing Se. It feels like he shouldn't. It feels like that was a lifetime ago, like she was a different person back then. A more naive, more trusting person. It's true enough, she supposes. She trusted him back in Ba Sing Se. She knows better now. But he looks the same. While she watches him now, his eyes closed, lit only by the faintest glow from the east, all she can think about is that day in the catacombs. When he was just a boy crouching across from her, his eyes, his voice softer than she ever believed possible. When he gave in for just a minute, just long enough for her fingertips to trace over his scar before everything turned to dust around them. Her throat burns and she squeezes her eyes shut. He looks the same. Just as soft, just as vulnerable. Just the same as the last time she believed that he could change. That he was capable of better. That there was compassion beneath the surface. And that if he were only willing to try, he could make everything different. But that boy was never anything more than an illusion. Zuko is real. Zuko turned against her in the catacombs. She can't delude herself about that anymore. He isn't kind. He isn't selfless. Bitter threads wrap around her heart and pull tighter and tighter. He's a firebender. He always has been. After Ba Sing Se, she should never have tried to heal him. After Ba Sing Se, she shouldn't have even brought him this far. The boy who betrayed her doesn't deserve her help. But the boy who lies beside her now, unconscious and unmoving, he came to her rescue. He leapt into a fight he couldn't possibly win without hesitation. He never stopped to figure out who he was helping. He threw everything he had into protecting Katara, and now Now his face contorts with every shallow breath. Now there's hardly an inch left of his body that doesn't radiate painful, broken energy. If he were anyone else, Katara wouldn't hesitate to do anything to keep him here. She would fight with all her strength to return the favor. Her chest tightens as she watches his face. This is Zuko. That has to change things. Doesn't it?